The Phoenix Fire Dojo was a cathedral of discipline. Sunlight streamed through the high, frosted windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, silent prayers. The scent was a unique blend of worn tatama mats, lemon-scented cleaner, and the honest tang of effort. On the far wall, a hand-brushed scroll bore 4 characters, Shinri, mined like still water. For the students who trained here, this wasn't just a gym. It was a sanctuary, a place where the chaos of the outside world was shed at the door along with their shoes. Among them, Maya Knight moved with a quiet intensity that set her apart. A freshman at the local university, she carried herself with a humility that belied her lineage. Her dark hair was pulled back into a severe, practical ponytail, and her focus was absolute. For 3 months, she had been a dedicated student, absorbing every lesson, respecting every partner. She never spoke of her father. His name was a shadow she both revered and sought to escape. She wanted her GI to be whitened by her own sweat, not colored by his fame. But today, the sanctuary's peace was about to be violated. The door slid open with a sharp clap, and Leo the Vice Martinez strode in. Leo was a physical specimen, built like a bulldog with a thick neck and the telltale cauliflower ears of a seasoned grappler. He wore his black belt like a crown and his smirk like a weapon. His reputation preceded him. A gifted martial artist whose talent was eclipsed only by his arrogance. He had a predatory habit of mentoring newer students by pushing them past their limits, a cruel practice disguised as tough love. When Master Kenji Tanaka, a stern but fair man in his late 50s, paired Maya with Leo for randori, a knot of apprehension tightened in her stomach. She bowed low, a gesture of sincere respect. Leo's bow was a perfunctory, almost contemptuous nod. The moment they engaged, Maya knew this wasn't sparring. It was an assertion of dominance. He didn't flow, he crushed. He didn't counter, he overpowered. Every attempt she made to apply a technique was met with a wall of brute, unyielding force. He used his significant weight advantage not to control, but to punish. "Not bad, princess," he grunted, his breath hot and unpleasant as he trapped her in a Kesagatomi hold, his forearm pressing into her jaw. "Got some fight in you." She struggled, trying to create space, to breathe, but his grip was like iron. He was a vice, just as his nickname suggested. Finally, seeing an opening, Maya shifted her hips, but it was a feint he'd anticipated. In a blur of motion, his arms snaked around her neck, locking in a rear-naked choke. It wasn't the smooth, controlled application of a training partner. It was a street fighter's clamp designed to inflict panic. His forearm dug mercilessly into her windpipe. The world began to shrink to a tight, dark tunnel. Maya tapped. Once, twice, 3 times, the universal language of submission, of trust. Leo didn't let go. Instead, he squeezed harder. He leaned in, his lips close to her ear, and whispered, "What's wrong? Can't handle a little pressure?" Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her training. This wasn't a lesson. This was humiliation. This was assault. Her lungs burned. Her vision started to speckle with black dots. Through the blurry haze, she saw the dojo door slide open one more time. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the afternoon light. He was dressed in a simple black tactical jacket and dark slacks. A man who could blend into any crowd, yet somehow commanded the space he occupied. His dark hair was pulled back in its signature ponytail, and a neatly trimmed, silver-flecked beard and mustache framed a face that was unreadable, carved from decades of discipline and something more dangerous. At 60, Steven Knight looked less like a movie star and more like a force of nature that had learned to walk and talk like a man. He had come to surprise his daughter, to watch her train from the back of the room, a quiet observer. But the scene that greeted him sent a chill through his veins that has nothing to do with the dojo's air conditioning. He didn't need to hear a word. He saw it all in an instant. The desperate, frantic tapping of Maya's hand on Leo's arm. The cruel, self-satisfied smirk on the younger man's face. The unnatural tension in his daughter's body as her struggles grew weaker. He saw a predator enjoying his power over a smaller, trapped opponent. The ambient hum of the dojo, the thuds of bodies, the quiet grunts of exertion, the soft instructions from Master Tanaka across the room seemed to fade into a dull roar in Steven's ears. A profound, glacial calm settled over him. This was a state he knew well, a place beyond anger where action became as simple and necessary as breathing. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He began to walk. His steps were measured, deliberate, each one landing on the polished wooden floor with an unnerving silence. He moved with the fluid grace of a panther, a predator whose very presence alters the environment. A few students, sensing a shift in the room's atmosphere, paused their drills. Their eyes followed the tall man in black as he made his way toward the center mat. Master Tanaka, demonstrating a foot sweep, felt the change too. He turned, his brow furrowing as he saw the stranger approaching the ongoing match. By the time Steven reached the edge of the tatami, Leo was still holding the choke, savoring the moment. Maya's movements had all but ceased. Let her go. The voice was not loud, but it cut through the air like a shard of ice. It was low, gravelly, and carried an authority that was absolute. Leo, annoyed at the interruption, glanced over his shoulder. "Relax, old man," he sneered, not even bothering to look at him properly. "We're just training." Steven stepped onto the mat. The slight compression of the tatami under his weight was the only sound. His eyes, dark and unblinking, were fixed on Leo. "I said," his voice dropped half an octave, resonating with a chilling finality, "let her go." There was something in that tone, a promise of swift, terrible violence held in check by a thread of will, that finally penetrated Leo's arrogance. He hesitated, then reluctantly loosened his grip. Maya collapsed forward, gasping, coughing, her hands flying to her throat, red marks already blooming on her skin. Steven's gaze never left Leo. He took another step, positioning himself between the bully and his daughter. "Step away from her," he commanded. Leo, scrambling to his feet, tried to reclaim his bravado. The smirk returned. "You got a problem? This is a dojo. If she can't handle the heat, she should stay out of the kitchen." Steven tilted his head, a gesture of cold curiosity. "You think choking a student after they tap is heat?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "That's not discipline. That's not training. That's you, hiding your own weakness behind a piece of colored cloth." The air crackled. Leo's face flushed with anger. "Listen, I don't know who you think you are, coming in here and—" "You don't need to know who I am," Steven interrupted, his presence seeming to suck the very air from the room. He took one more step forward, closing the distance. "All you need to know," he said, his voice a low growl, "is that you put your hands on my daughter." The words hung in the air. "My daughter." Leo's eyes darted from the imposing figure in front of him to Maya, who was now shakily getting to her feet. Recognition, followed by disbelief, dawned on his face. "He's my father," Maya said, her voice raspy but clear. "Steven Knight." The name dropped into the silent dojo like a stone into a still pond, the ripples of its impact touching every student. Steven Knight, the legend. The man whose on-screen persona was built on a foundation of real, lethal skill. A flicker of genuine fear crossed Leo's face, a primal instinct warning him he had made a catastrophic mistake. But it was just a flicker. In its place, a more potent and foolish emotion surged. Pride. To back down now, in front of the entire dojo, after being called out by a celebrity, it was unthinkable. His reputation, the carefully constructed image of an untouchable alpha, would be shattered. In his mind, the risk of humiliation outweighed the risk of physical harm. He saw only one way out, to double down. "So what?" Leo spat, puffing out his chest in a sad display of dominance. "Action hero or not, this is my dojo. You want to make an issue out of it? We can settle it right here, on the mat." The challenge was absurd, a mouse roaring at a lion. But it was a gamble born of desperation. He was counting on the fact that a man of Steven's age and public stature wouldn't risk a public brawl with a younger, physically imposing black belt. He was betting on civility, on the idea that this was all just talk. Steven studied him, his expression unreadable. For a long, tense moment he said nothing. He simply looked at Leo, his gaze peeling back the layers of bravado and seeing the frightened, insecure bully beneath. "You're sure?" Steven said, his voice flat, making it a statement, not a question. "You're sure you want that?" Leo's grin widened, mistaking the calm for hesitation. "I don't back down," he declared, his voice booming with false confidence for the benefit of the onlookers. "Not from anyone." A slow, almost imperceptible nod from Steven. "Good," he replied, the word hanging in the air with chilling weight. "Because I don't teach lessons with words." The gamble had failed. The bet was called. The tension in the room became a physical presence, thick and suffocating. The other students, who had been frozen in place, now instinctively shuffled backward, creating a wide, unspoken circle around the two men. They were no longer just students, they were spectators at an execution. Master Kenji Tanaka took a half-step forward, his face a mask of conflict. His duty was to maintain order in his dojo. But he also knew Steven Knight by reputation, a true master of Aikido and a man who embodied the spirit of Budo. He recognized the look in Leo's eyes, the toxic pride that was a cancer in any dojo. He made a decision. He would let the lesson proceed. With a fluid, deliberate motion, Steven shrugged off his tactical jacket. He didn't toss it aside. He folded it neatly, with the precision of a drill sergeant, and placed it carefully on a nearby bench. The simple act was a ritual, a silent declaration that what was about to happen was not a fight, but a ceremony. He stepped onto the center of the mat, rolling his shoulders once. The movement was slight, but it seemed to ripple with contained power, like the shifting of tectonic plates. Maya, her hands still resting on her bruised throat, watched with a mixture of fear and fierce pride. She knew what was coming. Leo cracked his knuckles, a theatrical gesture to mask the tremor of adrenaline. Or was it fear, coursing through him? He saw a chance for glory, a story he could tell for the rest of his life. The day he took down the great Steven Knight. He was about to learn that some legends aren't just stories, and some lessons are paid for in pain. The dojo held its breath. The informal circle of students tightened, their faces a mixture of awe and morbid curiosity. Leo bounced on the balls of his feet, trying to project an image of loose, confident readiness. Across from him, Steven stood perfectly still, his weight settled, his posture immaculate. He was a mountain, and Leo was the foolish wind that thought it could move him. "All right, old man," Leo snarled, breaking the silence. "Let's see if those movie moves work in the real world." Leo lunged first, an explosive, aggressive attempt to seize control. He shot in for collar grip, intending to use his superior strength to pull Steven off balance and execute a quick, decisive throw. It was a classic judo opening, powerful and direct, and utterly useless. Steven didn't retreat. He didn't even seem to move. He simply shifted his center of gravity, a subtle, almost invisible rotation of the hips. Leo's powerful pull meant nothing but empty space. His own momentum, now unresisted, carried him forward, causing him to stumble awkwardly. "That's your first mistake," Steven said, his voice as calm and even as a lecturer in a classroom. "You're fighting the idea of me, the man from the movies. You're not fighting the man standing in front of you." Humiliation burned in Leo's cheeks. He snarled and attacked again, this time with a snapping front kick aimed at Steven's knee, a dirty, undisciplined move. Steven simply raised his leg, turning his shin to meet the blow with a dull thud that echoed in the silent room. Before Leo could retract his foot, Steven's hand shot out, not to strike, but to cup the back of Leo's ankle. With a gentle but firm twist, he upended Leo's balance completely. The younger man pinwheeled his arms, hopping on one foot before crashing to the mat. Steven released him instantly. "Your second mistake," he continued, his tone unchanged. "You confuse aggression with power. True power is control. You have none." The onlookers were mesmerized. This wasn't a fight. It was a dissection. Every move Leo made was being turned against him, his own strength used as a weapon to defeat him. Master Tanaka watched with his arms crossed, a slow, appreciative nod on his face. This was martial arts in its purest form. But Leo was too deep in his own rage to learn. Embarrassment had curdled into fury. He scrambled to his feet, abandoning all pretense of technique. With a roar, he charged, throwing a wild, telegraphed right hook. This time, Steven moved. He flowed to the side like smoke, the punch whistling past his ear. As Leo's body hurtled past, Steven's hand gently cupped his elbow. He didn't grab or pull. He guided. In the same fluid motion, his other hand came to rest on Leo's back. It wasn't a strike. It was a push delivered with perfect timing and a profound understanding of kinetic energy. Leo hit the mat so hard the air was driven from his lungs in a loud whoosh. The impact reverberated through the floor. Gasps rippled through the students. Steven stood over him, one hand casually behind his back. "Strength without discipline is just a tantrum," he said, his gaze unwavering. "And you used it on my daughter." Gasping for air, his face crimson, Leo pushed himself onto his hands and knees. "What now?" he wheezed. "Gonna break my arm for the grand finale?" Steven's eyes didn't blink. "No," he said softly. "You're going to learn respect." He moved in, and before Leo could even get to his feet, Steven effortlessly applied a wrist lock kotegeshi. It was executed with surgical precision. Leo cried out as a bolt of pure, clean pain shot up his arm. "Tap," Steven commanded, his voice quiet. "I'm not," Leo began, but a fractional increase in pressure sent a fresh wave of agony through him, stealing his breath. His free hand slapped the mat. Once, twice. Steven released him instantly, stepping back as if nothing had happened. "That," he said, his voice now carrying to every corner of the dojo, "is how it works. When someone trusts you enough to tap, you honor it. You let go. You don't squeeze harder. You don't whisper insults. You respect the signal. Because without that trust," he gestured around the room, at the mats, the students, the scroll on the wall. "This isn't a dojo. It's just a cage for bullies." The lesson was over. The point had been made, not just to Leo, but to everyone present. The silence in the dojo was absolute, heavy with the weight of what they had just witnessed. Leo sat on the mat, cradling his wrist, his face a mask of shame and pain. The invincible facade had been stripped away, leaving only the pathetic bully underneath. Steven turned to Maya, his expression instantly softening from granite to gentle concern. "You okay?" She nodded, her eyes shining with a complex mix of gratitude, pride, and the fading shock of her ordeal. "I'm fine, Dad. Good." He gave her a reassuring look, then turned his back on Leo. "Then my work here is done." He walked to the bench, picked up his neatly folded jacket, and slung it over his shoulder. He and Maya started toward the exit, the students parting for them like the sea before Moses. They had almost reached the door. The confrontation seemingly concluded, when a low, venomous mutter cut through the silence. Still just a washed-up movie star, Leo had pushed himself to his feet. He hadn't shouted it, but he had said it just loud enough for everyone to hear. It was the last desperate act of a man who had lost everything and had nothing left but poison. Steven stopped dead in his tracks. His back was still to the room, but every person there felt the temperature plummet. He didn't move for a full 3 seconds. Then, slowly, deliberately, he turned around. The look in his eyes was different now. The teacher was gone. The calm, control master had left the building. The man who turned back was someone else entirely. It was the father. And for the first time that day, Leo understood the true meaning of fear. Steven handed his jacket to Maya without a word. He walked back onto the mat, his steps no longer measured but predatory. He didn't stop to talk. He didn't pause to lecture. Before Leo could even raise his hands, Steven closed the distance. It wasn't a single technique. It was a cascade of motion, a blur of pure, efficient violence. A hand trap, an elbow check, a subtle shift of weight. Leo found his arms tangled, his base destroyed, and his body crashing backward onto the mat for the final time. The impact was jarring, brutal. He didn't have time to process it. Steven was on him in an instant, flowing into a finishing hold. He bypassed the GI, his forearm sliding under Leo's chin, his other hand behind his head, locking in the same rear naked choke that Leo had used on Maya. But this was different. There was no cruelty in it, no ego. Just a terrifying, absolute control. Leo's eyes widened in panic as the pressure began to build, the world starting to go gray at the edges. "I can take everything from you in the next 10 seconds, Steven whispered, his voice a low, chilling rasp directly in Leo's ear. "Your breath, your consciousness, the career you think you have. I can break this elbow, and no doctor in this state will ever put it back together right." He applied a flicker of pressure to the joint lock he had simultaneously secured. Leo grunted, a sound of pure agony. "You put my daughter in this hold for fun," Steven continued, his voice devoid of all emotion. "You humiliated her to feed your pathetic ego. You thought that made you strong. But strength isn't about hurting the weak. It's about protecting them. And you are the reason men like me exist." Leo couldn't speak. He couldn't move. He could only feel the life being squeezed out of him, his own arrogance choking him. "If I ever," Steven growled, the final words a promise forged in ice, "hear about you putting your hands on another student, in this dojo, or any other, I won't teach you a lesson. I will be a consequence." He held the choke for another second, letting the terror sink into Leo's very soul. Then he released him. He didn't shove him away. He simply let go and stood up, towering over the gasping, broken man on the mat. The final line had been crossed, and the price had been paid. Steven Knight stood over the wreckage of Leo Martinez's ego, his chest rising and falling slowly, the storm inside him receding. He turned away from the man on the floor and faced the silent, wide-eyed students who lined the walls. His gaze swept across them, hard and unflinching. "Martial arts is not a game," he said, his voice resonating with authority. "It's not for ego. It's not for proving you're the toughest person in the room. It is a path to self-control. If you cannot control yourself," he paused, letting the weight of his words sink in, "you do not belong on these mats. You don't deserve to wear the belt." No one dared to look away. In those few minutes, he had taught them more about the spirit of Budo than years of training ever could. He walked back to Maya, his expression softening as his eyes met hers. The fierce protector melted away, and he was just a father again. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't need me to fight your battles," he said softly, his voice for her alone. "You have the strength and the skill, but you will never have to fight them alone." It was the perfect thing to say, an acknowledgement of her independence and an unbreakable promise of support. A tear she hadn't realized she was holding back traced a path down her cheek. She nodded, unable to speak. Together, they walked to the door. As Steven slid it open, he paused one last time and glanced back at Leo, who was now being helped to his feet by a hesitant Master Tanaka. "And for the record," Steven said, a faint, knowing smile touching the corner of his mouth. "Those movie moves you hate so much, I was perfecting them long before the cameras ever started rolling." With that final, cutting remark, he and Maya stepped out, and the door slid shut behind them, leaving the dojo in a thick, contemplative silence. The incident at the Phoenix Fire Dojo became a local legend. Leo Martinez was never the same. He kept his black belt, but the arrogance was gone, replaced by a haunted, cautious demeanor. He treated every training partner with a respect that bordered on fear. The story spread through the martial arts community, not as a piece of celebrity gossip, but as a stark reminder of what true mastery and real-world consequences looked like. Master Tanaka used the event in his teachings for years to come, reinforcing the paramount importance of respect and control. The culture of the dojo was stronger and purer for it. True strength isn't found in how hard you can squeeze, but in knowing when to let go. It's about protecting, not dominating. Do you think Leo got the lesson he deserved? Share your thoughts in the comments below, but please, always comment with respect. If you were moved by this story of justice and honor, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.